comment has been stated and there is no other, so let's move to the action item. Mr. Miller will approve the minutes of March 7th.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, information items. Brad?
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody on the telephone yet?
Hey, Brad, it's Alan.
Hi, Alan.
Oh, hi, Alan. Hi.
Take care of everybody.
Shannon Hannah with Van Squick is on.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Good morning.
Well, since we have our several folks from our state government affairs team here in the room, and Alan on the phone, let's start with the state update. And I'm glad that you guys are confirmed to come to our board meeting at the end of this month for an update. Take it away.
Okay, so I mean, obviously the legislative session came to a conclusion. The governor has acted on the budget, $88.7 billion of funding. You know, I think at this point, you know, I'm happy to, I think we've provided you guys all pretty much the update through the legislative session itself. If there's anything specific you want to talk about as far as it goes on the overall budget, the one thing that has come up this week is that we are potentially looking at a special session. It looks as though Senator Galvano and Representative Oliva may have come in or a landing, or at least close to, for an agreement from a gambling perspective, and they're prospecting that on the 23rd of this month that we will be called back for a special session as it relates to that, due to the fact that they're looking at potentially about $300 million loss if they don't come to a resolution from a budget perspective. So that's really kind of the latest is in that regards. Obviously, as a result of much of the legislation that was passed, there's several big issues that are being grappled with back in the communities that are kind of not necessarily specific to transportation or transit, but that are having an overall impact in just the conversation, be it the opioid issues with mental health, education funding, the school safety components. So there's just a lot of other big pieces right now that our local communities, as a result, as is every legislative session, but that they're going to be grappling with from a financial policy standpoint. Is there something specific, Brad, that you want to talk about? We can talk about the CRC. We just got the, we've been monitoring a CRC proposal that had been moving through the process with the commission. Just yesterday, 39, which is the proposal that had a ethics provision that would prohibit different municipalities, local governments, which would have impacted PSTA from having a lobbyist representing them in front of the legislature. But Tom Lee had put that language into the package, and as of yesterday, an amendment was put forth and passed to remove that language out of the ethics package, so that now going forward out of the committee, which is currently drafting those proposals, there's 24 of them at this point, that will go potentially to the full board for final approval. That has now been removed. So we at this point don't have any CRC issues specifically. The special districts piece that we had been monitoring had already failed to move forward to the next level. So the CRC is another active thing that we're monitoring right now, but as of yesterday, late yesterday, that was kind of you know, dismissed, I guess. So other than CRC and the current budget issues, I mean, our next big piece is for us to start talking about next year and what we want to do for our legislative agenda, the timing of that, getting our schedule set so that we can start to do the work going into the summer and coming out. Now that session is back on schedule, we'll be looking at obviously campaigns and different landscapes, and we can talk about that as well if you'd like to. We can go into kind of the races that are out there, the landscape that might be changing. For example, Senator Brandis is somebody that we have worked very, very closely with, and he has now he has an opponent. So, you know, we can obviously look at as an organization on our relationships and some of the landscape that's out there. Obviously, we don't provide campaign contributions, but we're very much involved in building relationships. So we can talk about any of that that you'd like to as we go forward in our next couple of committees. We'll want to have those on the agenda.
Sure. Well,
Excuse me.
Can I ask a question? So for the CRC, is it pretty clear that the lobbyist issue is out and won't come back regardless of what might happen? I mean, it's gone. It looks like it is gone.
Now, you can never guarantee that
Right.
something won't
But
come
it
back.
looks- But it looks
Right.
like.
But it's gone. At this
Yeah.
point, it's been amended out. It did not have a favorable support, and they were concerned that, I think it passed only like 19 to 17 when it got in. And I think that there was concern, not just on its own face, but that it would actually then taint the remainder of the ethics package, because it could create conflict for it not to be successful.
I just wanted to understand that because that was really important to some of the things that we've been working on, I know, and so obviously how we're organized right now, so thank you.
And then, I'm not that familiar with the whole CRC process. I've been trying to follow it myself, but what's the likelihood, like, what's the usual number that actually make it to the ballot?
So this only happens every 20 years.
Right.
So there's not a large, database of usual, but there is a very strong sentiment around concern around fatigue and overburdening what they put on the ballot. So there are 24 proposals that were put forward through the subcommittees that are now being compiled. The drafting committee that's working on it now is looking at how they can take the different proposals and combine them, and how they can look at bringing them in, because they've got to come up with a summary that is only, for whatever is included in that one piece, they have 15 words to summarize it and like 75 words to do the bigger summary of it.
Yeah.
So whatever they combine, it has to then be dissected. It can't be confusing. It has to be succinct. It has to be able to be, clearly articulated for ballot purposes. So it's going to be interesting to see. But historically, I think there was nine. I think there was 9 in the last round, and we're already, if you think about it, we already have 5 that were put on through either citizen ballots, citizen initiatives, and or legislative initiatives. So they're starting on number 6. So whatever they do going forward as a commission, and it's Amendment 6 and 7 and 8. So if you potentially take 24 issues, dissect them into 6, 7, 8 issues, you could potentially have, 13, 15
And
initiatives.
somebody needs to tell somebody that in doing that, need to be considering the cost, because that just duplicates the cost for the supervisors all over the state.
Just the
Before you
printing.
say any more, Natalie,
Yeah.
Commissioner Justice.
And on that point, I think voters will just vote no on everything.
I agree.
Back to the session, there was legislation out there about local government, and I didn't know if that encompassed PSTAs, but as far as travel and expenses for travel and limits on hotels for $100 a night, all those kind of things were in some of those bills. Do you know where all those landed?
I don't believe any of that made it through.
Nothing?
That was one of the Corcoran initiatives, and at the end of the day, it did not get a dance partner in the Senate.
For even for the school board?
Yeah, it was across the
It
board.
was all, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is that's like a major, that's an issue for all the state associations and stuff.
Yeah, I think it was HB1, I believe, right? And that was done by Michael Grant.
Yep.
It did not pass.
Yep.
So.
I thought there was one by another House member, not Grant,
There was, but I don't
that
remember
was
what
about,
happened to it.
included no foreign travel, which for our CBBs was important.
I'll have to look for that one
And
up.
for that, if you were going to travel, it had to come before, some local governments already do where they bring it as part of their business, but others, we set aside a budget internally and that's your budget. But I thought there were some other bills, but it wasn't Grant, it was, I'm blanking on his name, but, all right.
Okay,
But-
I'll double check that to see if there's another piece they slipped in.
And I didn't know
there.
how that affected, if that affected
Okay.
PSTA or not. but-
Yeah, that wasn't one that we reported on, so I don't remember, I don't think it got through, because.
Alan, do you remember?
I don't remember that.
I don't, Commissioner. I was actually just sitting here trying to think of it myself. The only one I remember is the big package. That was really the one that was discussed, and that's what Natalie mentioned. I don't remember, if there were additional transparency rules that just targeted CBDs maybe, but I don't believe that's the case. But I think Natalie's right. As far as I remember, it was just one big package.
We'll double check though to make sure we didn't miss.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. John, do you have anything else?
Thank you.
Yeah, Brad?
The one other issue that's come up in the last week is the T-BARTA bill and the $1 million that the governor signed for T-BARTA, I guess had a lot of very specific allocations on the $1 million that the the FDOT district secretary was announcing at the T-BARTA meeting a week ago Friday. It'd be nice to get a summary of that, or
We actually pulled the, because it's the 40-60 split, and we've pulled the language. In the budget itself, there is no specific criteria breakdown. We do have a copy, and we pulled it, and I'll send it to you guys, of what when every time you have to, all the appropriations, as you know now, under the House rules, have to be submitted with specifics through a bill process. So we've pulled that. I'll send you that, but that's the only criteria that's out there, and it's not that specific. So I'll be interested. I wasn't at the meeting for T-BARTA. Janet, you're on the board.
Yeah, and that more than half of it is gonna be spent on PD&E, planning and designing of that study, another study.
Well, it was a
but
40.
He was saying like you weren't allowed to use it for certain things like operating expenses of T-BARTA, like utilities and all this kind of detail, is what the way he kind of explained it at the.
My understanding is that the ability to use it was constrained by the way Michael requested the money. And I have yet to dig down into what that means.
The only criteria within the language of the budget is that there is a 40-60% split. $600,000 was quote-unquote earmarked for administration, so they can use it for administration. Now,
How much?
600,000 of it. The other 400,000 would be, for the other pieces of the planning piece. So,
Planning.
mhm.
Yeah.
Where are you reading that from?
That was in the budget. I'll send it to you guys. It was in the backup, because you know how, so they have to put together backup material that's then submitted.
Right.
It's not in the actual GAA, it's not in the budget itself, that's in the backup supporting material.
I would really like to get my hands on that ASAP.
We'll send it to you today.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes.
And then it certainly would be possible, right, for then the DOT to put further
So the process.
restrictions on that, or go back to the grant application that T-BARTA submitted and put stuff in there from that.
So typically, the way that an appropriation works, and we have members here who know better than I do, that once the dollars are allocated, signed by the governor, that then the department will work directly with the recipient of the money receiver, and they actually will go into contract. There's stipulations of how you can use those dollars, and that's true of whatever silo you're in. So whether you're coming out of education, you're coming out of historical grants, cultural arts, the department then works with you, and you actually sign a contract with the agency of record, transportation, and that's where the stipulations could be. I don't know that that's even been done, though, at this point for the T-BARTA dollars, because it would have had to happen like within the last week. So.
Well, I know the District Secretary Gwynn was giving, said to the T-BARTA board something that PSTA doesn't get the opportunity. He said that T-BARTA could somehow submit paperwork now and then be eligible to receive the funds on July 1st, the first day of the year. PSTA typically is only allowed to turn in its application on July 1st, and so we usually don't see the money till like August.
It's rare to see it on July 1st. I mean, that's just, but.
I
don't know.
I mean, I'd have to get clarification. We're happy to do some follow-up on that, because that's, again, I wasn't at the meeting, and I don't,
Right, but let me make a phone call after we get done with this meeting, because I've been discussing some of this with the Florida Department of Transportation, and these questions are tickling more questions in my head.
Because yes, the
than what I did
money's.
yesterday.
Okay.
The money's
Well,
become
'cause
available
I-
July 1st, but it's rare that you'll get a check cut on July
Right.
1st. And typically, remember, there's a lot of things, typically when their money comes down, there's a reimbursement process. A lot of times, you are required to spend it, have proof and evidence of spending that's eligible under the grant. You typically have to then put in an invoice with supporting documents. The checks usually have to have cleared your bank account. There's a whole protocol and process that goes into actually receiving your state dollars. It's not like July 1, you call up and say, okay, give me my check. So I would have to get into the weeds with you guys on that. And Ron, I can definitely, do some follow-up. So
When
Well,
is Ron back?
today, this afternoon.
Okay.
It's helpful just to know that legislative background, because as I think the chair can maybe would agree with me. There was quite a bit of confusion at the T-BARTA meeting. And this idea that it was like broken up into all these different, the $1 million was broken up into all these different categories, and you weren't built. I had never heard that from anybody or seen
The
that.
more troubling piece was that the staff itself of T-BARTA could not answer any of the questions, which has raised a huge.
Well, and I don't believe they've ever received a large appropriation like this, so it's gonna be new to them, and they'll probably have to navigate the process and understand how they work. I mean,
At our last meeting, of course, it states Mr. Pierce, talking about the T-BARTA and said, you know, one time for 600,000 for planning and 400,000 for operations. But I guess we're saying there's a whole bunch of other divisions in there now that we're not aware of. When you say
it's not in the budget, it's not documented in the budget itself, and we only have the supporting documentation. At the end of the day, the agreement with the state and that before allocation is done, that, I don't think we have a copy of that at this point, so. Those are all usually done after the budget's been signed.
So there may not be that. It may just be this basic level at this point.
Yeah. Again, I don't have answers because I didn't know that was gonna be a question, so we're happy to do some follow-up to sleuth it out a bit.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It was House Bill 815. It passed the House but died in committee in the Senate. It was the travel authorization by local government bill. So,
Who does it, you have it up there to tell you who filed it?
and it's Government Accountability Committee, and then Avila and LaRosa are the prime cos. But Metz was the one I was thinking of. He had filed a bill that was even much more restrictive, but that didn't go anywhere either.
And I remember that from Florida League of Cities, that one. No, you mentioned
God, this constant attack on local government is just.
Well, when you solve all the problems you have, it's, you know, you start wading into other people's issues.
You're hilarious.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Just two other state legislative issues that I know of. One is we submitted last week by the deadline, which is incredibly fast and efficient, our application for next fiscal year's transportation disadvantaged funds. Sorry, Patty isn't here to acknowledge that, but the legislature did approve of maintaining the overall funding for transportation disadvantaged, and included a, again, which we were worried they were not, a special allocation for mobility enhancement grants, which is what we're funding our PHF partnership with Uber with. And they did that again, so we put in our application, hopefully it'll get funded.
For how much?
Do you remember how much we put in for? 300,000?
You think 300, Cassandra?
Yeah. At least when I was in Tallahassee back on Valentine's Day, Steve Holmes was very positive about that we would see favorable results from our application. And then on Friday the 13th, next Friday, we have a meeting with Senator Brandis to update him on all of our projects I'm sure he'll be interested in, which is anything that's autonomous or Uber-like, I guess. We'll try to get some real transit stuff in there too.
What time is that
Yeah.
meeting? On Friday?
Well, I guess I see it's now been moved to his office, 2:30. I thought maybe he was going to be here, but
He told me he wanted to come here.
yeah.
Edward and our team was the one scheduling. I'm assuming it's based on what he's available for, you know.
Yeah.
In that vein, Brad, in terms of
We're working on it.
updating, I think maybe Cassandra might know all the answers to this, but you might too. Yesterday I learned in a debriefing that I had with Whit that you're working with Ray at T-BARTA to identify projects to pull down that 500,000?
Yeah.
So we don't lose it? Have you identified those projects?
We've identified a couple of candidate projects.
Your ACT project, I understand, is a perfect. fits
It is.
perfectly with
It might be. The Flamingo Fairs, Tampa Bay is another one. I talked to Ray a little bit about it yesterday, and he said, confirm it with WIT.
Well, there's a very big sense of urgency to identify those and put them forward.
Yeah, especially because they're having their trial review this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's possible that we'll be able to get some. It sounded like a smaller amount of money though when I was talking to Ray
It's
yesterday.
500,000. Rick
Well-
told me that yesterday.
Oh, he did?
Mhm.
Ray told me 200,000, but anyway. That's why we need Debbie over there to get over there to T-BARTA and help us with the real numbers.
So Debbie.
Thank you.
Yeah, Debbie and I have been talking about that. We're trying to get a meeting set up with Ray to talk about that and some other things. And actually, other funds that they have that we're also finding out about that could be expired
There's
grants.
3, and if we don't figure out a way to pull them down,
Right.
the money goes away.
Right.
And they've had that money since 2012. So I'm on it like a bee on honey, and I think it's a perfect opportunity for PSTA. Not that I'm being parochial or anything, but we have projects that we can identify, correct?
Well, that even meet the nexus of the grant that
Right.
they just need help trying to figure out where they can spend the money, and in some cases, they lack a match, so they applied for a grant and then said,
Oh, yeah.
or thought they would have a match, and then based on the conversation you all just had about the restrictions of the money they just received, they realized they no longer have the match, and so they need to rethink how they're going to spend that money. So, yeah, there's more than one pot that they're having challenges with, but we're gonna help them.
So make them financially solvent and take all their money for PSTA.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another issue that might apply to this perhaps is the work that you're doing on, perhaps not even on the autonomous vehicle side of a study that you may wish to do, correct? Would something like that fit into any one of these?
Well, yes, we thought, but apparently, at least the one pod that I know of, the grant that they received, it looks like the autonomous technology stuff would fall a little bit outside of the scope. But this is a very old grant. And the reason that there's some pressure to spend it is that it could potentially expire and then go back to the federal government and the region would lose it unless a project that meets somewhat analogous to the original intent of the 2012 grant, and autonomous vehicles really weren't around in 2012 or aren't being discussed that much.
So if I may continue on
Yes.
with this. So what we're talking about doing is proceeding down this road, and we talked a little bit about that, and you're looking for an area to maybe put that with the engineering company that wishes to help develop something.
Oh,
Say,
yes.
For example, in Dunedin or someplace like that. So maybe we can change some of the sources of money around here and replace it with something from one of those to cover something else. And Brandis, you're gonna be meeting with Brandis, on the third, what do you
Yeah,
say? Third
well, and
day?
that was the thought that we had.
Cool.
We've got some candidate projects we think will meet this old grant scope. And then we can take the money that we have programmed that was originally for that and move it to another use. Yeah.
Right, so the money is the one call, one click, right? So they started a program, the focus was on information, like a regional information portal. And so I think if we stick with that, if I recall correctly, there's some veteran services angle too. So I think we could come up with something that makes sense and makes sense for the region, especially on that regional information portal side.
Yeah.
Because he can make a phone call over at FDOT and, help figure some of this out. We can't figure it out by then.
Well, yeah, I was thinking that too, that if we kind of had a better understanding of that T-BARTA grant or the $1 million, then maybe Senator Brandis could make a phone call if we could direct him.
Good news is she's gonna get the details today to you, so.
I've actually got someone working on it right now, so.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. So, anybody else have any other
Anything
state?
else? No? Do we have future meeting subjects?
Well, I wanted to hear from Shannon.
Shannon,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry we rattled on for so long. Do you have any report for us? What's going on?
I do. I have a report for you. So several of you may know that the FY 2018 Omnibus Bill was passed last month and was signed into law by the President. The bill provides a total of $86.2 billion for the Department of Transportation. Within that money, FTA got $13.5 billion. And the Capital Investment Grants Program was increased from last year. They received, for FY17, they received $2.4 billion. This year, they received $2.64 billion, which is quite a difference considering the President, in his budget request, had requested that this program be eliminated and only requested enough money for to finish out current FFGAs. Within that $2.64 billion, almost $401 million was given for small starts. So there's also included in there, there's some language from the appropriators which requires the Secretary to continue to administer this program, and also says, and also requires the Secretary to obligate $2.25 billion of the capital investment grants money by the end of the calendar year 2019. So that's incredibly strong language and gives Congress some benchmarks to ensure that this program continues to be administered, which is very good news for PSTA.
So to that point, did you call Jane Williams, or did you get the letter out to her following up on making sure we do all we can to get her here in May?
Yes, well, you sent your letter, and then we sent another letter to her.
Yay!
Yes, so Shannon, we are trying to get the FTA administrator to pay a visit to PSTA, perhaps even when she, it looks like she might, because it looks like she's on the agenda. So that she's coming to Tampa in the first week in May to
We have to thank Henrika for that.
the APTA bus conference.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because, and then with this great news on the capital investment grant funding that Congress has approved, we have all along been targeting the fiscal year 2019 federal budget to get our funding for our Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit project. And our FFGA in 2019. So we wanted to clear the table with an 18 budget that funded all the projects in the pipelines, and then we could be teed up for 19. But now it looks like there's a possibility, with appropriate schmoozing of Jane Williams, et cetera, that maybe we could get our FFGA in the 2018.
It is possible. I will say FTA has been very good to work with. I will say there still remains some hesitancy at DOT to continue to approve these projects, given the President's viewpoint on this particular program. So I think it's one of those things that we will have to continue to talk to the appropriators and to the Florida delegation about the importance of continuing to hold the administration's feet to the fire and clearing out, like you were saying, Brad, clearing out some of the FFGAs that are ahead of you, sort of make sure that pipeline continues to move.
Right.
So, Shannon, I have a really wild idea. Has anybody on your team tried to talk to the president to figure out why he feels the way he does about these programs, since he's always...
They have not made a secret of why they don't like these programs. They feel like transit is a local responsibility and should be funded locally.
Even when it...
Terry, but Terry, we saved that for you. We thought you could call the president on that.
Well, Harry, thank you for chiming in, honey. My thought was, while I understand kind of, sort of, I mean, I do get who we're dealing with, he does come to Florida quite often.
That's correct.
And if it's local, that's one thing, but if it's something that's crossing county lines or operating in a regional way, he doesn't have any sensitivity to that, and the fact that there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and that the federal government has always had a role in that kind of infrastructure in our country. I mean, what if former presidents felt that way about roads going from one state to another?
I mean, Janet, you're exactly right. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Congress did what they did in the Omnibus Appropriations Bill, which is why that's really good news, and why we need to continue to really hone in on our advocates, because I don't necessarily see the administration changing their tune on this, but the reality is the appropriators are going to be the ones that hold their feet to the fire, and later on down the road can, you know, make it painful for the administration if they choose to not administer this program. So, so your idea is a very good one, and we will continue. I mean, I think the meeting that we had at OMB was very fruitful in reaching some of those people who are, you know, decision makers in that pipeline. So I think that's helpful. The second thing I will tell you is that I had a visit with the appropriators yesterday, and they told me that they are going to be having a hearing next week, I believe, with the secretary, and they have already been told by several member offices that this is going to be one of the very top topics that they will be asking the secretary for, because the past few hearings in relation to this program, she has said, well, we haven't gotten direction from Congress. You know, the administration has this position, but we haven't gotten direction from Congress. Well, now that there's direction from Congress, she can't say that anymore. So I've already been told by the appropriators that they're very much, you know, waiting to hear what her responses are there. And then the other thing to keep an eye out for is the FTA nominee for administrator is having a hearing, her nomination hearing. Her name's Thelma Drake. She's having her nomination hearing in front of the Senate Banking Committee on next Tuesday, or Tuesday the 17th.
And do we like her?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she used to be a member of Congress from the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. She was on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee while she was there, and my understanding is she is now in local government back in her old district. So I think that this potentially is another good person who will be transit friendly.
So Brad says he knows her. It sounds to me like we have an opportunity here.
I don't know her there. I met her.
Oh, he met her.
She was the head of the Virginia Department of Transit.
Well, that's like me meeting Jane Williams, and now I say, I know her.
Exactly.
So, hey, Brad and Terry, just an idea here. If they have a hearing coming up next week, what would you think about getting the FTA, your Florida group, to put together a letter to Chairman Diaz-Balart and say thanks for the strong language and support for the CIG program and small starts, and, you know, all these programs, all these transit authorities in Florida have projects that are in the pipeline and would benefit from your work, and, you know, give him some ammunition for the hearing next week. I think a letter, maybe a letter of thank you always goes over well, but also putting out there again that list of projects that are, you know, would benefit from the Department of Transportation coming on board with the Small Starts program would be helpful. And Senator Rubio is also on the Appropriations Committee. He's also very close to Secretary Chow. We could do the same letter to him and put it on his radar screen.
And actually, Harry, the hearing's over on the Senate side.
Okay, but still, I think it's
Yeah,
eventually,
agree.
just that Mario's going to have a hearing with her, and it would be good to have that information in his hands, I think, so.
Agree.
Can you do the rough draft of the letter and send it over and I'll sign it?
Sure, I need the list from Brad. I think he has a list of Brad, you have a list of the projects that are in the pipeline from Florida, right?
Yeah. And
If you
then,
just update that list, it would be good.
yeah, I mean, it'd be great if, I'll try to see if I can get signatures from the 5 or so transit systems that have projects on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. Well, in that vein, Harry, I had asked you to help develop a sort of strategy that this legislative committee at PSTA could review and then follow over the next several months to try our best to get the get a full funding grant agreement with the $18, which might include another, you know, at your direction or suggestion, another trip to DC or letter writing campaign or whatever you think is best. We'd like to try to do
Steve
that.
and Shannon and I have talked about that. I think one of the reasons I want to come by and see you on Friday so we can kind of go through the checklist of things that I know there are a couple of things that you have to do procedurally to get done for FTA.
Yeah.
So you can say all your boxes are checked. So we kind of want to go through that on Friday and just see what, I know there has to be funding commitments that have to be put in place with the city and other things, and you know, what other things need to be done and what's the timeline for that, so we can figure out how quickly you can be getting the queue for the 18 funding.
Okay.
And the fact, actually, Commissioner Long, the fact that the administration still undecided how they're going to move forward with this actually, I think, works in our favor because it'll slow down the release of the 18 money right now. So that will give you more time to get all the things you need to do at PSTA done to get qualified for that. So that would be helpful.
Excellent.
Now with the new FTA administrators hearing coming up whenever you said April 17th, I think. What would be the schedule, you know, for her taking office? Is it still like really late? Because Steve Palmer was saying it wouldn't happen until late in the year.
Yeah, because she'll still have to have a vote on the Senate floor, Brad. And so, and my guess is that she'll probably be packaged up with a number of folks that will kind of go in block. Right now the Senate's just pretty backlogged in terms of nominations getting floor time. But, I mean, it will be unclear. I think after the hearing will be something that I can always talk to banking and try to find out more information about what they think the timing might be now for a floor vote.
Okay.
And Commissioner Jane Williams had said in our meeting the other day when you were up there, she wasn't sure that she would get confirmed anytime soon. She seemed to think that it was going to be a longer process. So I don't know what information she had, but she didn't seem optimistic that it was going to be a quick confirmation. Not that there's anything wrong with this candidate, just as Shannon said, there are a bunch of judges and other nominees that are stacked up behind him, and then you add on top of that things like new secretaries, or, you know, the new Secretary of the VA has to now be confirmed, go through a process. So all of those will probably move to the head of the line ahead of some of these other ones. So.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
So do you?
Okay.
Are you done, Brad?
Yeah.
Do you have any? Or maybe you're going to talk on that on Friday about when you want us up there again.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian and I are going to get together Friday before the Senator Nelson meeting. So we'll work together, and then based on our conversation, we'll come up with a plan. I'll talk to Steve. Steve's back in the office tomorrow. I think Steve may join us by phone, Brad, on Friday, so we can all have a conversation about that, and then we can map out next steps based on your timeline of what we need to do next.
Great.
Excellent.
And thank you, Harry, for agreeing or being willing to come to the PSTA to join Natalie and Ron at the board meeting.
We'll see you on the 25th, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Harry's going to call the president for us.
Well, you know, know, I cannot have, we have this conversation and it takes me back to the time we were all summoned to DC. You were there, Commissioner, Justice, and that Bobby Kincaid said, whatever you need from any of our departments, you just call me and we will make it happen. Well, Charlie is rolling his eyes in the ceiling.
I don't remember the conversation exactly that way, but they would try and help. That's a long way away from, well, whatever you want, you'll get.
Okay, we'll try and help. I mean, it's the beginning,
Absolutely.
right, Harry?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Yeah, fun.
anything else under future meeting subjects, Brad? Anybody? John, Charlie? Nothing? Other business?
I did receive, I found the Senate form. If you want me, I'm gonna have them print a copy and we'll get them emailed through Brad to everybody. I sent you a real quick one on your cell phone. But it does break down. So when they put in an application for funding, both the House and Senate require that they articulate what they're spending it on, because they want to know that it's going to be a good ROI. And so they did break down the 40-60. So the 40%, which is the administrative cost, has been further broken down, but it's pretty high level still. So for example, they show $56,000 in a line item for executive director, project head salary and benefits.
Say again, how much?
56,000. 141,000 for other salary and benefits. 3,000 for expense, equipment, travel, and supplies. 200,000 for expense, equipment, travel, and supplies other. And then 600,000 for consultants, contracted services study, and there's some additional breakdown for description. Upon selection through the RFP process, the consultant will develop project schedule, work plan, public involvement plan to guide the RTDP development and all other major required projects. So that has to be what they're referring to, is that within the budget request, which was then what was included in the budget, they did stipulate how they were going to spend the money, because that's required of them to do. So that would be then the criteria they're speaking to. That is what the Department of Transportation, when they go to contract with the T-BARTA group to allocate their funds that have been approved in the budget, that will be the basis for the negotiation for the terms of said contract. So we'll make sure everyone has a copy of this. And it's very clearly articulated, but this was what they provided on the front end.
But the legislature didn't really, I mean, that could change.
That could change.
That could be modified.
That can, yeah. It's now, because now they basically go to negotiation for a contract. So the terms of that contract can be adapted. So for example, even after you go to contract with the state, you can do addendums, because I'm doing that right now. I have a small educational organization doing workforce development for kids with disabilities, and we got halfway through our grant with the state for $500,000 and realized that we kind of mispositioned something, and so we're doing an addendum to our agreement with the state to redirect about $50,000 of the $500,000. So it's a fluid process typically, so long as the underlying intent of the dollars is germane.
So we did it. I mean, they did it.
They did
themselves.
it. They were the ones who put the criteria forward. Yeah.
When you say they, that's T-BARTA, right?
Right, because they're the
Right.
ones who put the request in.
That's right.
So Brad, I've sent it to you and Cassandra if you want to push it out to the whomever.
Okay.
I don't have everyone's handy email here.
Only other business that I have to just confirm that you all got an invite to Senator Nelson coming here to PSTA on Friday.
Yes, it's exciting.
Got it, yeah. It's about 18 other meetings and events happening. Friday, I've never seen so many events happening on one day as this Friday.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow.
At least on my calendar.
I was gonna say, because my calendar is pretty blank except for that.
And I heard that that's the Dunedin Highland Games or something, so that maybe Dunedin would not be attending.
Innerkilled. We'll be here in Innerkilled.
I think that's would be hilarious.
Yeah,
Shall I wear my kit?
sure.
Absolutely, why not? Be proud. We'll all know where you're from. There won't be any question from anyone. And bring the bagpipes.
Bring a piper in the back of my Jeep.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I got.
Okay. Natalie, you're a genius. Thank you for sending that to me. I can't tell you how excited I am.
Edward gets all the credit.
He does?
He's back in the office. He was the one that made that happen, so yeah.
Oh, good. My Joel does that to me too. Okay, so we have we exhausted other business now? Harry, you have anything? Did you hang up? I guess you did. Alan hung up a while ago, I think. Shannon, are you?
But I don't have anything else.
Okay. Shannon?
I don't have anything else.
Anybody else? No?
On days that we have light agendas, is it any possibility that we move these meetings to right before, right after a regular board meeting? Is that,
Brad?
Possible, yeah.
especially,
Anything is possible.
especially this particular one where our lobbying team will be giving the same update at our general board meeting? Just, especially for those that have to drive a distance for a
That's
meeting.
a good idea. I don't know why I didn't think of it myself.
You all drive further than I do, so.
I know. And plus we were.
We
here-
try to get they come to the, one meeting a year.
Right, and that's
Should
what made me
coordinate
think
that.
of it, you know,
Yeah.
But we were all here on Monday too, so technically we could have done both of them on Monday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That would be helpful.
Well, you could have, I couldn't have, but I couldn't have been here Monday, so.
All right. Well,
Just something for, as you're thinking about calendar.
something for staff to work on, Brad, if that would be good with you. All right, then, for the good of the order, the next meeting, right now, is scheduled for May 2nd, but subject to change based on whatever you guys do. And without further ado, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Great conversation today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
Mr. Counselor from the whatever.
Whatever you are.
Hey,
Oh, okay. That's my standard
This is
operating.
just their application, part of his application.
Yeah.
yeah, but I got a Thursday because she said that part of the issue is that.
Oh, really?
Yes, Mike.
Well, no,
I guess he meant like he said, we're gonna get updated with the board.
Oh, you won't. I mean.
Yeah, because